morning, folks. Welcome to our Thursday Ask the Expert. Uh, Sadly, our guest speaker uh, from the Association of Chamber of Commerce Executives is unable to come. She had an emergency, a family emergency this morning and had to back off, but she has suggested that she will certainly make room in her calendar to come and join us again. And I think it would be wonderful to hear from the Americans' side of this story. I think a lot of us have heard what some Americans are saying, but I think it would really help us really understand what we need to do and where we need to concentrate our efforts,
He
even
wants to
from
run
an
your bed
advocacy
this time.
perspective. Uh, it's um, it's it, it's valuable information to have. I think what you would probably have heard from her is that they are working heavily on their democracy as opposed to the tariffs at this point, although they're very concerned about the tariffs. But I think they're her. I know her. My conversation with her was really around their democracy and their concern for what's happening from that perspective in their country. But anyway, we do have some stuff to do with you, though, and some information to bring to you, and maybe a few tales. So I'll turn it over to my friend and colleague, Ian McLean from the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber, and he'll start things off.
Yeah, Greg, great to be back, and I wish this was under different circumstances, but we are where we are, and we continue to and jointly. Just to rewind the tape a little bit, we of course have worked closely together for, I'm sure, decades, but certainly in the 14 years we've been working together around on issues like this of how we collaborate and come together. So this is one example, our chambercheck.ca, where with every passing day we put more and more information in between these Ask the Expert sessions. Um, with great information from our partners, whether it's at the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, Canadian Chamber of Commerce, our partners like BDC, EDC have put great information. Other organizations like Excellence in Manufacturing Consortium. So we're trying to put all the information in one place that you can go and educate yourself on some of the issues. One of the things we find, Greg, and I think this is unique, because when we did this last time, it was during COVID, and to some extent we were all affected in similar ways, shutdowns and etc. This is much more individual, and for everyone on the call and for those that have watched online afterwards or and have commented to me saying everybody is a little different, right? Their business, because it depends on how much of your input costs come from the United States, where your market is that you're trying to sell your product. So everyone's a little individual. And I think one of the things we wanted to do today, because I know we talked about this yesterday, our Best Waterloo group, Greg and I, Tony Lamantia from Waterloo Economic Development Corporation, Matt from Communitech, was we're starting to get those individual examples for people saying, here's how my business is affected. We had one company yesterday, Greg, and maybe we should give a couple of examples and say, how can we help folks through? So we'll give a couple of examples. I guess before we get into the detail, one of the things that we're really conscious of is how do we support businesses that are affected in this early stage of whether these tariffs are coming on, Greg. And so we are trying to make those cases of how do we support businesses that are affected with government support programs as needed, and other things like how do we create the environment and give our members an understanding of who is actually doing things in Waterloo region and Southern Ontario, where we can have substitutions, like you can have supply chain substitutions, because there's lots of capacity here in Ontario, and we're going to have to look for substitution opportunities. We're going to try, and we'll talk later in the show about an idea we're trying to come together for a a trade show of sorts so that people can explain how they can support businesses with a variety of substitution opportunities.
Just
But
before you carry on, I did for those who came in a little bit after my my early announcement that Sherry Ann Kelly, the president CEO of the ACCE, is unfortunately unable to make it this morning because of a family emergency, but she has said that she will be coming on in a future date. So just to let you know that if you don't hear from her, that's why she was unable. She let me know very early this morning that. She just got back from a trip and had a family emergency to deal with as soon as she got into town.
and we'll rebook her when she has some time next week or the week after. And I guess maybe, and then let's get into some of the examples, and then we can open it up if people have other examples which we can kind of look at for how to help folks. Is what we're trying to do right now is make the case of why we should avoid tariffs in the first place, because we're already seeing that it's affecting people on both sides of the borders. We see the steel and aluminum tariffs are already had some layoffs in different parts of the province. It's going to affect, in particular, U.S. Suppliers, and whether it's in auto or in construction, it'll go all through the system. It's not good for anyone, so we got to try and figure out how we avoid the tariffs in the first place. Um, Try and look at supply chain substitution options for Canadian companies here, so they're not caught in it. Some of the things that I'm encouraged by, Greg, is the speed at which the provinces and the federal government seem to be working on lowering and eliminating interprovincial trade barriers, so we can freely trade with inside of Canada. That's great. And then obviously we've talked about this for years, Greg, but we got 50 other countries where we have some free trade agreements around the world, and we need to start taking advantage of those. So but I thought maybe you'd start with the example. We've had two examples that we talked yesterday with our Best Waterloo group around how people are being affected, and some of the discussion around do we try and help those folks by having carve outs for specific industries, or do we really say we got to support those companies with government support programs, but look at those the and I think is a longer term and more sustainable solution, which is how do we have supply chain substitution strategies so we're not so reliant on the U.S., because I think what we've seen is they're not reliable in the way that we've always imagined them being reliable as a partner.
Yeah, and it concerned me the other day when I had one of our members come up or give me a call and talk to me about their particular business. This is really an interesting and I think an unusual circumstance, but there may be more of this than we realize. So this individual refurbishes computers for Dell. He's one of the largest refurbishers for Dell in North America. Um, Dell, as you know, is in the United States, and computers, as you know, are primarily manufactured, well, all manufactured in China or Asia somewhere. Well, this individual buys used computers. They are turned in after 1 year lease programs that Dell has. And so they're a year old, but they need to be refurbished. So he buys them, brings them into Canada, refurbishes them here, and then sends them back out. And you've seen them all. You can buy a refurbished computer on at Best Buy or Staples. Well, those are his customers. So he sends them back out to Best Buy or to Staples or Business Depot in the United States, and he also supplies used computers to a lot of school districts in the United States as well. He's oftentimes most times, those computers are being shipped back into the United States for redistribution to either consumers or organizations that are going to implement them. Here's where the problem is with him. He's importing them now and it was fine while he was bringing them in from the United States. There was no tariffs on them. But when he now sends them back to the United States, there was a 20% tariff because they are Chinese origin. So he gets hit with a 20% tariff going back into the United States. But since Canada has put on 25% tariff for computers coming into Canada, he now pays 25% when it comes in, 20% Chinese tariff going back into the United States, and then on April the 2nd, he will another 25% will be loaded on top of that. So it'll end up being in total about 70% tariffs on this equipment. It really what it does is it literally takes him right out of the game. So he's sitting there thinking, what do I do with my business? Because I can't, can I find a supplier in Europe? No, that's not where Dell Computers is or any of the other computer companies. So he's got a real problem, and his only way that he sees getting out of that problem is by moving his operation to the United States, and that's 90 employees. And he just really literally sees no way out of it. And we're not talking a few $1,000s on every shipment. We're talking a couple of $100,000 on every shipment, and he has 3 or 4 shipments a week going down to the United States. So this is a monumental impact. I think, and of course, what's he say to me? Hey, can we get something straightened out on this? Can we get this carved out? Can the federal government lobby to have this taken out of the equation? Well, the problem with that, every single industry, everybody here would say, yeah, I think my business should be carved out as well. You're not never going to get that, and then it ends up defeating the purpose of trying to eliminate tariffs in the beginning. And I think Flavio Volpe, if you remember when he was on a couple of weeks ago, he actually said that he encouraged his members to not lobby for a carve out of auto parts. He feels it's important that in order to demonstrate the real cost to the American consumer, that we need to buckle up and hang on to this and show the administration in the United States that tariffs are not the way to go. But we're dealing with all kinds of problems like that, and I think the federal government, we're waiting. Ian and I are waiting, uh, with bated breath for the programs to come out to help companies who are impacted by tariffs that on imports. So when the federal government put tariffs on products coming from the United States into Canada, they did promise that they would have a program to be able to alleviate that problem a little bit with some grant programs or whatever programs they're going to announce. But we're waiting for those, and as we all know, the federal government's in a quandary right now. But hopefully, they can put their swords down a little bit and come up with programs so that businesses like this one that called me the other day can at least get some relief for the tariffs that are imposed on him for products coming in from the United States.
And I think one of the encouraging things, and I think this is what we've heard, Greg, and I know incoming Prime Minister Carney, I believe the other parties have said the same thing, is in imposing some of these import tariffs or reciprocal tariffs or whatever we want to call them that Canada will place on U.S. goods coming into Canada. There seems to be a movement of saying those dollars should immediately be put out to the affected businesses that are going to have to pay those import tariffs, right? So we support directly the businesses that are affected. The unfortunate part is, because we're in this kind of caretaker mode, there'll be a new government in place tomorrow. I think the cabinet's sworn in tomorrow, but we'll be into an election by all accounts within a week or 10 days. And that's going to stretch things out because there's not much you can do until the election's over and a new government, whoever that happens to be, whether it's Poilievre or Carney, after the election. So we're trying to move some things forward now in the short term, and I think as we had Chris Andre on from Gowlings, Greg, a couple of weeks ago, be careful about making quick decisions. I know it feels like you got to make decisions. It's almost like, what they say in sports is when you get under the gun, slow things down, not speed things up. And so I encourage everyone to take a bit of a breath. And so what you've described, Greg, is some of the ways that we are going to encourage folks and we'll be looking for ways to support is on import substitutions, as an example. And there's another example, so I'll use this example that we talked about yesterday with our colleagues from Best Waterloo. Local company, been in business for, I don't know, 40 years. They're sort of in the hydraulics and components business that support, manufacturing broadly, but supply chain into manufacturing. And they said, hey, look, can you help us with a carve out? Because 60% of all of the things that they have to buy, and it's a very technical, there's a lot of safety requirements, et cetera, that a lot of regulation. 60% of their fluids and their the hydraulic components are coming from the US. So when these import tariffs are put in place, that it's going to be an unsustainable business model. And I think that's why we've had some of these discussions of saying, how do we support individual businesses with this, unjustified additional cost that has to be put in place? Because these examples just speak to, Greg, this is a race to the bottom. It's not good for Canada. It's not good for the US. It's going to harm businesses and the workers that they employ. But we are where we are. So we got to look for that how do we support people in the short term, kind of get back to some semblance of normalcy in terms of trade. But this example of the company in the hydraulic space is a carve out is going to be impossible to get. And that's one of the reasons why we can lobby for those. I don't think you're going to get those. I think we have to be working with people on where can they substitute with a Canadian supplier or a supplier from somewhere else that is not subject to those tariffs. And so that's some of the work that we're planning on doing, Greg. And maybe we want to at least touch on what we're thinking about or organizing, because I think it's going to be where we say, the example we use is during COVID, Greg, we did not produce one piece. We did not have one company in Waterloo Region or Southwestern Ontario that did anything in the PPE space. Masks, gloves, shields, you name it. We didn't do any of it in Waterloo Region. And in the space of, I think it was 8 weeks, we had people producing masks. We had people doing shields. And by 2 months in, 3 months into the pandemic, we were producing virtually all of that in Southwestern Ontario from a standing start. So we can pivot. We do have the industrial heft and the capacity and the skills and the expertise to do things. We just have to figure out who needs what pieces to substitute in. And it's where I think it was an idea. Well, I know Greg's been at the chamber for 120 years. So at some point in your last 120 years, you came up, was it Cambridge Now? No, Cambridge Now. Yeah.
Cambridge Can. Yeah, it was actually an initiative by the city of Cambridge back in the 90s. And I think there was, if I remember correctly, I wasn't at the chamber at the time, but it was a recessionary period or a slow period. And actually, there were a lot of vacant industrial buildings around, not a lot, but there was a handful of vacant industrial, big spaces. And what the city of Cambridge came up with at the time, the Economic Development Department, was they said, why don't we do an industrial show where we can showcase what we make in Cambridge, or the businesses, what they can showcase their wares. And potentially it could open up a door of opportunity where a local business can find the local supplier, which would, generate two ends of the stick of economic growth and prosperity. I thought it was a brilliant idea at the time. Actually, the city of Cambridge got huge accolades for connecting businesses, and there were a lot of companies that found local suppliers. One of them it was the funniest story ever, where they were actually neighbors, physical neighbors in their manufacturing facilities. But one of them saw the other at this showcase show, Cambridge Can, and looked at a bushing that this company made and said, "Man, where do you sell that bushing, or what do you make that for?" The guy said, "I'm not quite sure what it's for, but we make it for a wholesaler in Montreal." And the guy looking at it said, "We actually buy that bushing from a wholesaler in Montreal." And it was literally made in their backyard. The companies were like literally abutting properties and didn't know what each other made. So we're trying to put together in conjunction, hopefully, with the municipalities in the regional Waterloo and the regional government, and our best Waterloo team, which is Ian and I, along with Waterloo EDC and Communitech and Explore Waterloo region as well. We're hoping to put on a showcase of that nature for the entire region, where we could potentially have 300 or 400 industries displaying their wares as to what they produce or what they make. And it could give opportunity for local companies who are importing from outside of the country, or even from another jurisdiction, to say, hey, I can find a local supplier for that. The other thing that we're doing, which I think, Ian, might be more exciting for a lot of people, and this could be enduring as well. This could be something that could carry on for a long, long time, is we're hoping to be able to develop. Actually, we got our friends at Communitech and Waterloo
Hmm.
EDC are working very, very hard right now to put together um, an online database of companies and what they manufacture and what they do in the regional Waterloo, and allow the ability for you to go on and plug in what supplies you would need or what type of materials you might need, and it would connect you to a local supplier of that product or that service. So I think that's something that certainly could have enduring legs and might be a really good thing for us to have. So more on that to come. It sounds very complex, but Ian and I are not quite as techy as the folks at Communitech, and they're thinking they might be able to stand something like that up in a few weeks. So hopefully, we'll be able to get to that.
And I think that's going to be important for everyone on the call, and some of you will work with supply chain partners or people in manufacturing. Some of that already exists. It's just that what we haven't done is bring it together. So Tony has contacts. I think it's a Trillium Manufacturing group, and there's others with Excellence in Manufacturing Consortium and others. We're trying to bring that together and say we just need a who does what, one database where you say, hey, look, I need a bushing, or I need a shim, or I need a whatever the component is. Maybe it's hydraulic components for your automation in your plant. Who does that in Waterloo region and in our local area? And I think we can put that together fairly good. And I think, Greg, you hit on something that's going to be important for folks. Even if tomorrow or today Donald Trump has a true social stream of consciousness and says, I got it all wrong, we're going to eliminate all the tariffs, I think it's important for us to recognize that even the uncertainty of what's gone on over the last 6 weeks is devastating for business. It's devastating for people making plans for capital investment, for people just figuring out how they're going to run their local business. So we have to be looking at some of these longer term solutions of saying we got to be more resilient and understand who does what here in Waterloo region, how we can again import substitutions, local procurement where we can for inputs in manufacturing and for other sectors. And so those are some of the things we're going to be working on, like this database, like the trade show opportunity. I think those are things that will have some legs to it. And I think in the medium term, those interprovincial trade barriers are going to be a real opportunity for Canada's economy as a whole, and taking advantage of those other 50 countries that we have free trade agreements with already is going to be some of that medium and longer term solution as well.
And Kerr put in a comment about what his company, what his cost consulting firm does. If anybody wants information, certainly connect with him and Kerr, connect with me, and we'd be happy to. I'd be happy to have a discussion with you. My email is greg@cambridgechamber.com. So anybody can reach out to me anytime and talk about issues that they have as well. But and I think Ian touched on a really important point, and we're all kind of like that. Look at what happened with COVID. COVID kind of more or less went away, and the all of a sudden you'd see there's no masks, there's no gloves, there's no hand sanitizer at the grocery store anymore going in. Not many grocery stores. We forget about that stuff, and our lessons learned out of it, I hope, don't get filed into the garbage can, that they actually get filed somewhere where we can handily grab them and say, these are the measures that we need to do. But I think what really Ian and I want to emphasize is all of these things that we're going to do to try and connect you with one another for supply chain purposes, but also to connect with the other 50 jurisdictions. We're never going to stop trying to do that. We're never going to stop trying to get you to diversify. If you're heavily reliant on your trade with your U.S. customers, we want to help you, and we're going to continue to help you. Even if these tariffs come off, we're going to continue to help you bridge those relationships elsewhere around the world where you can trade freely as well.
Okay, well, maybe we should again, and we will have Sherry Ann, because I think you off the top you talked about it, getting the U.S. perspective, and we talked with several folks this week. I know we spend more time together, Greg, than you like to admit, and I like to actually spend with you. But we do spend a lot of time, and one of the things that is important is to get the U.S. perspective, and so we will have Sherry Ann on in next week or the week after. What I thought is important, and I think we've talked with some folks this week where this seems to be, if there's some good news or green shoots developing, Greg, that there are more. The spell is broken of no one wanting to say anything because they didn't want to be in the president's way. So, meaning American chambers of commerce and business organizations and even politicians saying, "Hey, wait a minute! What you're doing here with these tariffs is affecting my constituents." And we're seeing this with the farm lobby, with potash being subject to trade barriers. We're seeing this in a variety of different ways where Americans are themselves understanding how harmful this is for their economy and for their citizens. So that's good, and so we will have the American view in the coming days. But maybe we should open it up, because I think some of the utility of this is, where are some of the, because we don't know how this is going to impact your individual business, but using some examples of how it how it's affecting you and your business operations are good examples for us to be using, because we are asked on a daily basis how things are affecting business, and it's very useful for us to get even though it's not for an industry as a whole, anecdotal examples are very helpful for us, Greg.
Yeah, absolutely. Raise your hand if you want to make a comment or ask a question, or whatever you want to talk about is fine. I might seem like I'm a little distracted. I apologize for that, but I'm actually watching the people coming in or requesting to come in, so I apologize. Anchor, go ahead.
Well, good morning, everyone. Ian, Greg, great insight. I know time is tough. And what I'm trying to say here, that I always use an example, that when we are trying to sell our house and someone is trying to buy our house, we clean the garage and porch first. And at this time, it's a perfect time, regardless what happens on both sides of the leadership, it's perfect time for us to clean our processes and procurement department and supply chain plays a major role in diversifying the suppliers right now, and timing is right. And this is not a sales pitch. This is something I have been doing it in whole my career. In 2019, 2020, when the tariffs started coming, that's what we exactly do. You gave a great example, Ian, when PPEs were built here, and I know some of those companies because the ramp up was incredible. So this is a perfect time to diversify your supply base. I always say that keep your friends closer, keep your enemies more closer, and keep your supplier closest in that way. So 50 countries, including a country just south of US, Mexico, provides so much influence in that type of things like hydraulics, and all other things, the transformers and all electronic commodities, plastics, all those things can come from there. And one of the things that my consulting comes, and I kicked off because I did this thing for years, and now I'm opening my own consulting because, and timing can be worse or best, I don't know, but I provide service in Mexico because I speak Spanish. I do provide service in Mexico. I have traveled across the globe many times to China. I know China is not an option, but Southeast Asia, India, and other free trade countries, we can free, where we can work and globalize our supply chain. This is time to be dependent on us rather than anyone else.
Mhm.
So, but again, charity begins at home. My company also can provide procurement optimization. We can bleed money, thousands of incorrect spending, and we can do spend analysis to make sure that we have optimized spending. And when time is right, if tariff comes or not comes, we are ready for that.
Yep, perfect.
Mhm.
Okay, anyone want to reach out? Lauren actually put something in there about aluminum manufacture in Ottawa. What's really interesting, Lauren, about that is actually, America's got a really big problem with this because they can't, they literally, they have no capacity to produce the amount of aluminum and steel that their industries are going to require. They don't. They have no. They really have no option but to import. It's interesting. I saw a beer can manufacturer last night from the United States was on and says he has tried over the years to buy aluminum from America and he can't. He just can't get it. And so he's going to have to continue to buy his aluminum from Canada, and it's going to increase the cost of his cans. And eventually, the brewer that he sells to is going to increase their costs as well.
It makes no sense.
No, no. Oh,
Yeah, yeah, and I think Lauren had made the connection on seeing it on a BBC or CBC yesterday, and we're hearing this all over. The Americans' challenge is in the president keeping insisting that it won't be Americans that pay the tariffs that he's put in place on steel and aluminum. It absolutely will, because it's going to affect everything from construction to building fridges and washing machines and beer cans and canned goods. It's all going to be borne by the American consumer themselves, because they just don't have the capacity. And I guess one of the things, Greg, again, you can imagine a world where suddenly there's more foundries and there's more aluminum and steel production in the US, but that's not something that happens in 6 months or a year. I mean, you're talking 2, 3, 5 years to get that up and running, and there's just no way that their economy can support it. But Lauren's comment is right. Is we still got to get through the short term, and so how do we support our friend Keenan Loomis, who was president of the Hamilton Chamber of Commerce, is now the CEO of the Steel Aluminum Association, I think, and
yeah.
they can't make sense of it. He was interviewed and said, I like, they can't produce what we can, and they need our product, and they're putting these tariffs in place, which it will affect our workers here. But more than anything, it's going to increase costs in the U.S., which is just tragic, because it's going to fuel inflation, which neither Canada or the U.S. Needs to see with the economy just kind of getting into recovery. So
There's a guy that I follow, and Ian and I have talked. I sent it to Ian a couple of weeks ago, and he's been watching a couple of his little videos, but he also does a live stream every day. But you can find him on YouTube, and it's Mr. Global.
Mm-hmm.
He's an oil and gas expert. He actually owns his own oil company in Oklahoma. But this guy and of course, he's dealing a lot right now with the whole aspects of trade. He's got a lot of videos on about trade with Canada and the importance of the Canadian oil that the United States buys to them, and he goes on most of his little vignettes, and he refutes a lot of the individuals online who are putting out just simply conspiracy theories and inaccurate information. But if you want to maybe feel a little bit better about about Canada and our position in the world, especially with respect to the United States. Mr. Global and some of his vignettes are really good. Actually, I'm working. I've communicated with him a little bit. I am working to hopefully get him on at some point, because he does have not only is he a global oil and gas expert, which, by the way, there are very few that have the designation of oil and gas expert in the world. This guy, understands everything from fracking to, bitumen, how to move oil, what's most cost effective. He thinks, Keystone Pipeline is a complete joke, that Canada should be going east and west.
East and west, yeah.
And there's no question about it. But in any event, we're going to try and get him on at some point too, and he would be a little bit entertaining, but also a really valuable content as well. Any other questions or comments or inquiries? Though I did see some real estate folks on. They must be pretty happy that the Fed or the Bank of Canada reduced the interest rates by 1/4% yesterday. Although it was a cautious reduction, and it was a cautious reduction because they actually had thought about not at all reducing it, um, because I think they're a little bit worried about what inflation will happen as a result of tariffs as well. So, but nonetheless, they did uh, knock it down 25 basis points, which is probably it's good for business, because business has those adjustable rate lines of credit and loans. So it will be very good for business.
Now, one of the things, Greg, and if people want to think about this and either email us between now and next week's session or come back next week, a couple of things that would be useful for us to know, again, when we're talking with folks like the federal government or provincial government about things like how are the tariffs affecting your cash flow and your credit, and and cost of financing your business, because if you're subject to tariffs 25%, that's going to be hard to sort of bankroll, because some of the things that that the federal and provincial government will need to be looking at is how to support businesses to cash flow some of these tariffs, and so if you've got colleagues feeding in some of the examples of where the pinch points are, the pain points, would be very, very useful for us to feed in. And again, and this is, I guess, a bit of a plug for the Chamber Network, Greg. We work together closely, but we also have our friends at the Ontario Chamber of Commerce that are working at the provincial level. We've got our friends at the Canadian Chamber that are working along with us, but at the national level. So we all have ability to have those conversations with the decision makers. We talk to provincial cabinet ministers, federal cabinet ministers, but the chamber movement at all levels is working with municipal, provincial, federal governments and business organizations on what it is that we're hearing from our members and from our communities to shape how we support business through very rocky road that path that we're on. So any information you could feed into us with specific examples of whether you're working with businesses, because some of you will be a trusted partner of folks in the businesses that are affected by tariffs, or if you're your own business being affected. It helps us to give some to have those examples of how this is actually landing on the shop floor, so to speak, because we will continue to be asked for how can we support business to get through this period of time, Greg, and that's like we did during COVID. We were asked that, and we're going to be asked and continue to be asked like we are during in this tariff war, which is, it's hard to even spit those words out. I cannot believe that we're in a tariff war with the United States of America, but here we are. So we need to be gathering information and trying to figure out how to navigate through. You're on mute there, Gregory. It's been 4 years, almost 5 years, and you're still on mute.
I know. I forgot my sign. I should have my sign in here, but we have our colleague on here from the Woodstock Chamber, Kim Whitehead. She's been on, I think,
good.
every week. Yeah, that just shows you that the chamber network is well connected with each other, and we work hand in hand with the Ontario Chamber and the Canadian Chamber to come up with solutions and lobby for businesses. That's our job. Our job is to make sure that our communities have the right balance, that businesses can thrive and prosper and create opportunities for others. So thanks, Kim, for joining in with us as well. We certainly appreciate that. And you're more than welcome to pop in and have your say anytime you want. We'd probably all learn something from you as well. Any other questions? Go ahead.
I think, no, just saying, Lauren just adds, which I think is falling on some of the conversation, saying a lot of business owners are frozen in their tracks, and that's what we're seeing too. Is we see that in our colleague Tony at the Waterloo Economic Development Corporation, for local businesses that are looking to expand, or foreign direct investment of people bringing investments into Waterloo region and investing here. A lot of those things are just are on hold. And that's the uncertainty that's here. It would be very short-sighted to make an investment decision anywhere in North America while with this fear or the uncertainty around tariffs and where that's going to go, and that's harmful. It certainly is harmful for the investment climate in Waterloo region, but it's right across Ontario, throughout Canada, and across the U.S. Like, we're seeing this. This is not just isolated to us. It is having an impact, and we hear that from business colleagues in the States, Greg. I think Sherry Ann will bring that message. It's not good for the U.S. economy or for ours. And I think Lauren's right. Is that the uncertainty that this is producing is going to. It's going to, and it's not good. I mean, the business growth comes from investment, from investing in what's next for our economy, modernization. We can't do much when people are sitting on their investment dollars because they can, in good conscience, make a decision when they don't know what's coming down the road. And so, trying to provide information and some clarity and figuring out how we move forward. We hope that this is, and again, Greg, this is something, I mean, we talk about, we hope this is as short as possible, but who knows? I mean, Donald Trump if he decides he wants to keep this going for 2 to 4 years, I probably has the capacity to do it. I don't know that it makes a lot of sense, and hopefully sanity will prevail. But we've got to be preparing ourselves for this period of uncertainty and try and provide, some certainty or some ability for people to be able to say, I see the path forward that may be less reliant on the U.S., but still allows businesses to make those investment decisions, because those are our jobs of the future, and to maintain the jobs that we have right now.
I think Lauren brings up an interesting point. However, what are we? How are we going to define what tanking is? Because the experts are saying somewhere around 1.5 to 2% of GDP is what we potentially could lose as a result of the tariffs. I think what also we have to remember. I don't, quite frankly, believe that the tariffs are going to be in forever. I think the people in the United States, when the layoffs start coming, the hundreds of thousands of layoffs in the
Yeah.
auto sector that are going to be coming, there's no question about that. I think Donald Trump will have to be forced into doing an about turn on it anyway. But let's say that the tariff stayed in force, had some endurance to it. Maybe they get negotiated down a little bit, but they're still there. At some point, the bubble starts to level off again, where consumers and businesses start to become accustomed to the tariffs. It's kind of like what we went through with COVID. The very beginning, it looked devastating, and it looked like it was going to be an incredibly serious problem. And yet, what ended up happening was we actually had economic growth throughout COVID. Um, Only because, yes, it had a dip in the very beginning, a sizable dip, but came back relatively robustly once we became accustomed to what the patterns that we had to do and how we had to do our business. So I think I think it's interesting, and I understand exactly what you're saying, Lauren. We're hearing the exact same thing, that businesses are pausing. Um, but at the same time, our recent survey that went out didn't. I was quite surprised at the high percentage of businesses who are directly impacted by tariffs who didn't feel that there was going to be a significant alteration. Now, there was going to be an alteration in their business. There might have been some layoffs, or they might hold off on purchases. But I think a lot of them felt that they were going to be able to weather the storm, not forever, but for certainly the short term. So I
And I,
think,
and I, I think that's why, Greg. I mean, some of this is like, we call it medium term. I mean, the short term is really what's happening in the next 1 to 3 months on tariffs. The medium term starts at now and goes for a period of time of saying, how do we do those import substitutions? How do we reshore some of the supply chains here so we're less reliant on the U.S.? How do we support business? And I think you're going to see this from the federal and provincial government saying, how do we get new markets for our businesses to sell into? If there's, and I wouldn't say this is good news, but I think one of the realities is Donald Trump has now picked a fight with the entire world, not just us, the European market, China. I mean, he's tariffing, and he believes that that is the way to whatever, to support or increase the American economy. There's no evidence to that whatsoever in global history, but that's what he thinks. But it does produce an opportunity for, when we find other markets, other countries are going to be, we can't go down this road. We actually have to have free trade between one another. And I think that that's an opportunity in that diversification of our markets to, and if we're doing more with Europe or more with South Korea, or Central and South America, where we have free trade agreements, where we can, it will have the effect of um, the Americans will have to see that this is not good for their own economy, and get back to what they've always been, which is a trading nation. And so I think there is some opportunity for us to be looking at those midterm opportunities for where else can we sell, because that will be good for us in the long term.
yeah, I am firmly optimistic that the people of the United States and the Trump administration will realize that 19th century economics don't work in the 21st century. So it just won't make any sense. But But you know, he's stubborn and always likes a win. He will never say he was wrong, or he'll always, I think what needs to happen is the world needs to help Donald Trump find a way out of it that he looks like he's a hero. I think that's really where the problem is.
I think Kristen just posted here, must be something from, looks like EDC. Is that what that says? EDC, a trade supports for Canadian companies. So again, information like that, and thank you for that, Kristen. That type of information I think it's already on. If it's not, it will be shortly in our chambercheck.ca, where we have videos and other partners like BDC, EDC, our economic development departments. If there's good information that it could be helpful to you and your business, even from an educational perspective, it will be in chambercheck.ca. Encourage you to go there. Partially because you almost have to continue to do a little research on your own, because your business or the businesses that you work with will all be affected in very, Greg, I would say individual or very specific ways. It's not a broad brush, and it will require a little bit of knowing your business, doing some of the reading around programs and how the tariffs are going to affect certain sectors, so that you know what's right for you or your customer or your client, to adapt and navigate through these choppy waters.
Yeah, we'll get that EDC link up on our Chamber Check page. It appears to be information on trade credit insurance
Yeah.
and managing currency fluctuations, and all good information, and probably things that maybe we didn't need to worry about before, but we certainly have to worry about now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we will. I don't know. We will see if we can get Sherry on next week, Greg. But we'll have an expert on, and we'll continue to. Again, I just maybe close in the last couple of minutes we have, Greg. Please do share, Chamber Check with your customers, your clients, and for yourself. Please check out. There's always more information going on there, and do reach out either through Chamber Check or to Greg or I individually at our chambers of how this is affecting you and your business. What are some of the again, those pain points? Because it will help us to try and work with decision makers, municipally, federally, provincially, on how to support business in this the short term with programs. And some of it is, Greg, it's just access to capital, it's credit insurance, it's can we help with the financing of the tariffs, because when we collect them, are we going to push that back out to businesses that have had to lay that out? So there are some of those things that will be very helpful to have examples to go to decision makers of saying, here's how you should support business in this short term.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Thanks very much, folks. If there's
Okay.
nothing else, then we'll let you get on with your day and make some new contacts. Hopefully, they're not American contacts. So,
Have a good day,
folks. Have a good day.
Thank you.